Hi, Karishma. Welcome to Conscious Revolution podcast. I am so delighted and so excited to have you here.
Hi, Shivani. Thank you for inviting me into this space. I am equally delighted and excited to be here and open conversation with you.
Yeah, I feel like this is such an organic conversation because, all of my conversations are very organic, um, I feel like, uh, intuitive and in flow rather than very scripted or pragmatic. But at the same time, I feel like this is different because most of the time there is a one topic that I'm like dealing with. Oh, is it food or is it emotions or is it this and that? And this time I feel like since we both come from the same, we kind of like are on that same, the work that we, our life's work kind of revolves around the same theme. And I feel like this is going to be a very interesting and a very raw conversation to also kind of like share with the world. I feel that just because somebody is doing spiritual work or sharing it with the world doesn't mean that they have it all figured out or they are the experts or they are, like they don't have to go through the human stuff anymore. And I feel like this conversation and this theme is so relevant right now when the face of spirituality is just going through a whole transformation, especially in our country where spirituality has been primarily associated with religion. um so yeah, I'm actually very excited to hear you and your experience in how your life brought you in towards spirituality and towards your life's work and what you do and what you share with your community.
Wow, yeah. Um, yeah, first of all, you're very right in saying that spirituality is going through a facelift at the moment, because I think the consciousness of the world, of the planet, is going through a lift. It's going through a lot of cleansing, a lot of purging, and a lot of regenerating. And I think the way that I began, or the way that I was called to remember that I am a soul first, just like all of us. So I think, I mean, just having said that, this thought just came to my head that I actually don't think there's any difference between spirituality and humanity.
I love that.
Learning how to be a human
Yes.
through the lens of understanding that you're a soul, which means that every part of your humanity is sacred because it's just energy. It's not any more personal than your existence and the nature of your existence. And I think a lot of and I think that my baptized, wait, let me find a better word. I think how I began was through being so disconnected with my humanity that I was just not able to feel like myself anymore. I wasn't myself anymore. I was kind of moving through life in autopilot and very zombie like. And the worst thing was that I knew that I was being that way. I had a lot of self awareness married with no will because I was so confused and so lost. And I felt so far away from my core that I didn't even think it was worth investigating to see how I would take the first step. You know, it's like
Mhm.
almost at that point where you're like, I'm just giving up. I'm not even going to pretend that I'm alive. And that brought me, I think that being in that pit of despair, reaching that point of no return almost where I was like, okay, fuck this. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to pack my bags and I'm going to leave with this invitation that has appeared to me from the universe. That is this light, one very far away remote light at the end of the tunnel that is like, okay, maybe this is the path, even though it directly wasn't in tandem with what I wanted for myself. It was my ticket. It was some ticket. So I took it and I went. And through this process of trying to assist someone in setting up a wellness program or a long term residency, which would require people to come in, live, and go through this whole reinvention program, a whole alchemical transformation process, I met the teacher or the man who would then go on to become my teacher for the next year and a half in altered states of consciousness breath work that I primarily work with today in the realm of healing. Able to, I think I only impart or I only share, as you say, with community, my experiences and my journey because I'm continuously on it. So it's really not like sitting in a classroom and reading a textbook and being like, this is a sacred text and these are the rules and these are the processes and protocols. And if you follow this, you will reach nirvana or enlightenment or whatever. Like that is way above my pay grade. And I am not interested in trying to profess that any of it is mine. And I think that has been one of the most humbling realizations that has come through working with breath and understanding that by energy, that nothing belongs to you. It is very hard to also live with that paradox in a world, in a material world where you do have survival needs and you do need to feel a sense of belonging, so the two coexist in this very interesting dual scape within us. And that is where I think these healing and these experiences that help you to step outside of just your reality and your story help for you to be able to create harmony within this duality and coexist in the material world with the understanding that you're a soul.
Yeah.
So that
I
you don't have to feel torn between the two, it's really just a really amazing dance.
Hmm. Yeah, I love how you said on the path of humanity, not on the path of say spirituality, because I think that kind of like really like sums up everything that you just shared. Because I feel like yes, actually the desire to become spiritual, to explore spiritual modalities, to dive, even if just like like just touch, crack the surface, is it comes through a desire or sometimes a need to know yourself. And it's all literally about to know your human essence, or as and as he has just also said, also about the whole awakening that we're talking about right now. Some of us are aware of it, some of us are not, and it just doesn't matter. I feel like there was a point when I was talking so much about 5D and spiritual consciousness and higher consciousness and ascension. and and I just feel like as we are like this whole podcast today is about bridging the gap. And I feel like at this point, it doesn't matter if even you know about it or not, you're on the journey anyway. You are
Yeah,
still going through the shifts. There are people who have no idea
I love that.
what astrology is happening, what portal we are in, or what modality. Like they know nothing
Or
about
what
it.
the chakra system is.
Yeah. And they're still like, I think that's the whole point. Like when our earth is ascending, it's not just about I am ascending and you are not. Like that separation conversation just goes out of the window because the earth doesn't like, discriminate. Like, okay, this person is like, of course, everybody has their own spiritual path, their own spiritual ascension process. But I feel like when I do my energy updates, when I talk about astrology updates, I'm always collectively saying we are going through this, we are going through this. Of course, the experience differs for all of us depending on our personal life graph and our personal awareness. But at the same time, we are all going through it together. So,
Yeah,
the whole conversation, unity consciousness, this is what it is about. But when, as you said, I'm not interested to be here on a pedestal and to like tell you this is what it is, this is what it is. Uh, that steals away the sense of unity consciousness. That just takes away the very concept of what is actually about we, what is actually about collective awareness or consciousness. So I just like resonate so deeply with what you just shared. I think this ties in so beautifully, right? Like what we were discussing right before a conversation about the masculine and the feminine, about like the for those of you who don't know, the masculine is like the more logical, more reasoning side of us, and the feminine is the most flow, the most intuitive, the more creative part of us. So again, as I said, it doesn't matter if you're aware of it or not. We are going through a whole shift in the way our energies are interacting right now. So yeah, how did, like, thank you for sharing that story about your own personal journey, but how so I love that how it kind of like came into you, came towards, it was an invitation, a ticket, that this is the next step. So I would love if you could probably walk us through a little bit of about like how actually the feminine kind of like got you to the light at the end of the tunnel, got you to actually create the structure, to actually call in and actually make it a work. I don't know about you, because like for me, I know I didn't even know about coaching industry when I started. I didn't even know there's a whole spiritual wellness industry. I was just like, I've got these gifts, I know this. And of course, I was aware about the whole ascension and spiritual uh, awakening that we are going through. And I was like, okay, this is it. So I'm going to start from here. So how was it for you? How did it kind of like manifest into your, how did you actually create, let me be honest, like how did you create that structure?
I think I'm still creating that structure, or that structure is being revealed to me bit by bit. Very honestly, there was no, there's never been a grand plan in the sense of a map that's been given to me, already charted, or that I have aspired to seeing somebody else as a pioneer in this field. I didn't know breathwork existed, except for one automatic writer who I was sitting with in a waiting room after my sensory deprivation tank experience. I used to go to the center and receive the hypnagogue light treatment to activate my pineal gland, and then go in for a sensory deprivation tank experience. And one day I was sitting here and there was this lady who I've never met, who just went into a trance, opened her eyes, and then told me breath. And I was like, cool. She has no idea what's happening, but okay, cool. And cut to, I don't know, it slipped into the back of my mind, and life continued on until it's only in retrospect, when I look back at the past 3 years, that I cannot deny the existence of magic, of synchronicity, of the abundance that the universe holds. This, we can call it a feminine force, we can call it Shiva Shakti, but essentially, again, they're all just titles that we're using to connect to terminology, right? And because they make for great talking material like we are doing now. But in felt experience, it's just the moment and the decision that you're going to take, whether you're going to say yes or no, and that's guided by your intuition. So,
Yeah.
in that sense, I would say that from that first breathwork session, when I laid down on a mat and started to follow instructions of somebody I'd never met and was doing something I'd never done before, no idea what was even expected. I had no conversation with him to be like, what is this going to do? How is it going to help me? I just went in. That it's from that experience, the voice inside me started getting louder. And all I did was start listening to it, sometimes against my better rational judgment, because this is just a processor. It's only projecting like a camera on a film screen. It's projecting predictions based on past decisions that you've taken and the impact that it has had on your nervous system. I mean,
Yeah.
we're just machines. They're very complicated machines and they're beautiful machines, but we are machines. So upgrading my software has become my path. All of these tools, these practices, I look at very simply just to keep upgrading my software like any other
System.
technology, because this we have access to technology, to light technology, and we're the only creatures on the planet that have the ability to process this, to harness it, to process it, and then to act from it and create more beauty and service and an impact in the world.
Yeah.
Those have definitely been my driving impulses, because ever since I was a kid, I've been attracted towards realms of service, realms of like esoteric, the more mystical aspects, like devouring books on theology and paranormal activities and actually everything, geography, history, everything. I just loved knowledge and information because it opened up my mind, and because my actual environment was quite traditional, conservative. I was quite the freak. Um, Not quoting myself, but quoting not very memorable times actually. Um,
And those of you who don't know, Karishma is a Scorpio rising, correct?
yes, I am.
And I'm just like mentioning it because like as you're speaking, I can like, oh, how different my experience has been. So I just feel like obviously, like when I got to know like she's a Scorpio rising, like of course, like, and which is why everything that you said right now, growing up with this in the esoteric realms,
Yeah,
it's
the
been a thing.
taboo worlds.
Yeah. And for
Yeah,
me, honestly, it's not been like I've not grown up with those things. Honestly, it just came to me like this, and I would say it was like an instant download. Like I've never received a tarot reading up until probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. So till 24, actually, I had like nothing to do with astrology or tarot or any bit of esoteric, honestly, in my life. So yeah, I love like how we all have just such different experience. Like because a lot of people think that you need to have some spiritual, background or influence, and those of us who do have it, as you just said, it triggers some like not so memorable experiences. Uh, but at the like it's just like I love how the universe works, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like for some of us it could just be in like an instant, like it could just be like, oh my god, what is this? Because I was like freaked out like in my last few years have been like, oh my god, this is a whole new world.
yeah, 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 and it is, and everybody's timing is different. Like you said, everybody's um, history, everybody's record that they come into this life with, because I'm a believer of karma, of reincarnation. And by that, by subscribing to that belief system, it simply means that you arrive in this life with baggage. We all arrive with baggage because we have genetic information encoded in our DNA. We have ancestral inheritance, like I said, saved in our body, but also stuff, but also material that is plugged into our collective unconscious. And it's kind of like a general pool that everybody draws from, especially when we start doing a lot of this inner work and we start tapping into deeper realms and thinning the veil between the material and the psychic realm. Everybody's timing, everybody's journey is different. And I think, I mean, just coming back to the subject of, of bridging the gap, I think my biggest intention or my strongest impulse for today's session and for our conversation is to be able to transmit my personal experience of felt understanding that spirituality can also carry this burden of the past of, like you said, there have been traditions, there are still traditions, there are schools, there are different ways and different masters and different structures that have been created, because without structure there would be chaos, but within structure there also needs to be room for flow, for spontaneity, for creation. And that is the difference, broadly speaking, I would say, between just plain spirituality and spirituality with dogma, aka religion. So every single person, by virtue of being this machine powered by an energy source, is, we can't become it. We just awaken to remember that, oh, okay, I'm more than this body, because when this body ceases to function, something leaves the body, which is the
Mm.
essence of a person. I mean, there are so many ways today to detect or to understand for yourself that there is a soul within a person, which don't require us to go into a laboratory and spend many years researching this. There's just very, very small everyday insinuations and instances. Our feelings and emotions are generated by an energy body. So where do emotions come from? That's also a very large part of my work, is in helping people connect with with their felt experience with the right now, which means that their attention is not in their mind anymore, it's in their body. And this is a very practical, methodological way to map your internal ecosystem, your internal universe, so that you can really start ascending in your own path, in your own way, because the guidance that you need comes from within. This is about stepping into your own empowerment and remembering once again that you are your own guru and you chose. these set of circumstances. You chose the role you were going to play because these are lessons that your soul needs to learn in this version of its existence, in this human
Mm.
life. I don't know what came before, I don't know what comes after. There are many modalities to even access things like that, like opening your Akashic records, doing past life regression, even breath work, just other psychedelic plant teachers. I mean, there's so many ways now for us to start accessing all the dimensions and realms that exist. But the most important thing is that the closed mindset is not blocking us anymore. Because these things have
Mm.
always existed. A lot of them have just existed behind closed doors, especially
Yeah.
even breath work, which is not as woo-woo as, let's say, opening an Akashic record, opening your Akashic records with someone, as many would maybe say. Even though you're lying down and you're breathing, still it is very hard for the rational mind to accept that you can have that kind of transcendental experience even though you know that nothing else has been given to you, nothing has changed. All you are doing is breathing, but it is so unfathomable. This is how limited we have been in our mind. But that is what is shifting. And
Yeah.
that's what I love. And that's why I show up in service because this continues to open me up. And if I can
Mm.
have this experience and this shift in my life, then it's my honor and my privilege and my duty to information I've received from other lives that I have led of giving back and serving people because it gives me so much joy.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not a I journey alone, but each self-realized person, each self-actualized person is a healthy unit that feeds into a healthy collective. Because
Yeah.
eventually you're kind of giving back to yourself only. So the more trapped you are, the more limited you are, the more shit you're carrying that doesn't belong to you. It just needs a deep vacuum. You're only impairing yourself and impacting yourself negatively. And now you have a choice. You can make a conscious choice. I think that is true spiritual power to make conscious choices that are not driven by past information or past traumas or another person's story, even if it's your mother or your father or your grandmother or anybody or society or culture.
This is something which is coming so big. Honestly, it's something that I just had a conversation about last night with my sister. And yeah, there's a, gene key or a gate 50 in human design, which talks about the patterns and talks about the DNA information that we contain, which is very much so. Gene keys is like very much what you're talking about right now. It is a study about uh, it's based on this genetic information that we carry in our genes, and that how everything, and this is coming so big for me right now, that how every single thing that I'm experiencing, um, especially the more undesirable circumstances or
Yeah.
situations, it's all a recreation, and it's a continuous recreation until you are like, no, actually, I want something different. I don't want to break the cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sending back this order, wrong delivery.
Yeah. Yeah, because and it's just weird that sometimes it can take so many years. Actually, if you really like, as you said, there are so many different ways to access those realms these days that we are aware about. uh that, yeah, actually it's not just about the last, say, 5 years, 10 years, my entire life. It actually goes back through lifetimes. And yeah, like lifetimes, like, how they say, like, you repeat your ancestral trauma, you repeat your generational trauma, you repeat your past life traumas, and you do that, and again, this is so, all this information, honestly, so much of it just comes from within. It's like in those moments when, like, for example, like day before yesterday, I was reading a very average romantic fiction, because this is something that I've like started to pick up, like, to also indulge myself into. I think it also comes with this bridging the gap, right, into the things that which are earthly, but which also makes life, right? Like, not just always reading self-help books or spiritual books or just consuming spiritual stuff, but also, like, it was just so not spiritual. But oh my god, like, I think I read that book for like 2 to 4 hours, and I was just crying through it all, because even though it was a book, the characters were based from the medieval, probably 1920s, 30s, in Europe. And it just like so many words and situations felt so resonant with what I'm experiencing right now. And I was like, oh my god, I cannot even, like, how can I connect with this so much? Like, I'm not a character from the medieval 1920s or before that or something, in that space where I could connect to, say, a woman who literally would find, probably, how you would marry because, or you would look for a husband because genuinely women couldn't work that time. Like, they
Yeah,
they didn't have the option to, like, wait, or they didn't have the option to see through, or to, like, stand in the power and say no, I'm going to choose the person I marry. Or even if they get the permission to choose, they marry, probably more of a Western concept. It's so much rooted with class and nobility and all of these things, which are things which are not so prevalent right now, at least in metropolitan cities that we live in, right? In the modern India that we live in, a lot of us are unfortunately still a part of that fragment, but I am not. But still, I could just feel, oh my god, so much of it feels resonant, like I am that girl. And I'm like, it just it just doesn't make sense, because see, I am like this independent city girl, and I've had this educated background, and my parents are not like sitting on my head to say, like, you have to marry this person right now out of force or something. Of course, there are societal influences and all these things, but I'm just giving this example to kind of like just share that uh through that absolutely earthly experience, which I was like, okay, I deserve to ground, I deserve to just, like, connect back. I was actually looped back into the work. Like, you're always doing the work, I feel. And to just recognize, I feel like it was such a healing experience, honestly, reading that. Absolutely, like something that probably, trash books that you read when you're probably in your teenage years. It was one of those, just the time pass. I used to just do it for like a beach read. And I'm like, thank God I actually did, because I felt like I cleared so much of my past life stuff. I cleared so much of my ancestral stuff, because I felt like, okay, this is not my experience, but this is definitely my mom's, my grandmoms, and women before them.
yeah,
And so much of, and I could literally feel how so much of my life right now is being dictated by that information. And I'm like, no, thank you, not continuing that anymore, because I'm not that.
yeah,
But you're still up, like, this is just an example I wanted to, like, really, a story I wanted to really share, to like, yes, how this really works out actually
yeah,
in tangible terms. Like, we are actually recreate, like, and this is so subtle. uh and this is like we don't even know how many of us are actually rinsing and repeating, rinsing and repeating, rinsing and repeating our
yeah,
traumatic past, our traumatic uh, generational traumas. Like, uh, it's very
yeah,
unfortunate and it's very heartbreaking, I feel like, because a lot of us wants to we want to make different choices, but it's just so weird. Like, I don't know if I was sharing it with you in our last conversation, but so much of it has been like, it's funny, as I'm healing, I'm just realizing the last few years, it's like so much of it's like of me is now like I am coming back to like my early teenage years. I'm like, how did this happen? Like, didn't, like, you grow up, you have this education, you go out in the world, you have this confidence, everything, and then so many times when you'll actually do the work, you will actually go back and you're like literally placing the foundation yet again, because that foundation sucked. uh,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. This is something that is very commonly felt, and something that many people report actually, that when they start the healing journey and when they start to shed things that aren't theirs, let's say, going by the premise that nothing is ours, there's still conscious choices we make to create this sense of self. But none of us had that opportunity when our ego was developing, right? Because that happens in our earliest childhood years. Those are our formative years. And at that point, our primary caregivers, our immediate influences shape this very sponge-like consciousness that we hold. And then what we're constantly doing is repeating those patterns. We're repeating that feedback loop because we've gotten comfortable with it. We've gotten comfortable with our discomfort, even in situations where we don't end up receiving the outcome that we wanted, but we still keep creating the same causes because that's what's been pre-fed into our system. But the truth is that you can always teach a dog, an old dog, new tricks. And we are very much like that monkey see, monkey do, right? We're extremely impressionable beings. We are constantly being conditioned, and our programming is what is formed as a result of that conditioning. So, for example, there's a candle that I've lit here. As a child, if I put my finger in the flame and I didn't get the response that my finger is burning and I'm in pain, I would keep doing that, right? My body gave me a signal. So we've received a lot of feedback, positive or negative. Now, whatever judgment needs to come on top is secondary. But every time we receive a feedback, we form a memory. And then we start acting from that memory, which is why so many times we find that our reactions are so disproportionate in the real moment.
Yeah.
And that's why it's a reaction, because there is no time to pause and reflect. And that is where the work that I do, which again I link directly to awakening, because all it's doing is reminding you that you have a choice, and not by philosophy, not by you studying tech for the rest of your life or needing to subscribe to any religion or faith, but only by honoring your own human experience. Because there is
Yeah.
no bigger teacher and there is no bigger rewiring that can happen. Nothing can change you from the outside. It's only internally when you really start going through a transformation, the quality and the experience of your life shift. And which is why a lot of people start to feel more younger, more youthful, more vibrant, and more free, because now they are not limited by the projection of them only being able to do A or B.
Hmm.
Suddenly you've regressed, and regress usually has a negative connotation, but let's just say you've gone back in time to, and again, this is because the mind thinks in a linear way. We think we've gone back in time to our younger years, but actually all we've done is step into the present moment when our sense of self does not feel as much of a straitjacket as it does when we're going through life, and we are constantly reacting to the demands and the roles that we play, the expectations of others, ones that we've internalized, our self image, our identity, our sexuality, our gender. I mean, look at how many trappings we have, you know? So, healing, awakening to your spiritual self is just a way back to feeling light and joyful and blissful for no real reason, but just that you can feel alive. You
Yeah.
can stay in touch with your body. Now you see what's happening. It's like breathing. We are breathing all the time, whether we are aware of it or not, because that is controlled. That is the most primal part of our existence, right? It's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So it's the same thing. It's like you're moving through life and you're asleep. You're breathing all the time and you don't know that you're breathing, but it's what's keeping you alive. And then suddenly you start bringing consciousness to your breath and you're like, oh
Hmm.
my God, this is what it feels like to be me. This is what it feels like to have so much space suddenly.
And this
It's
is
it's
how it
it's
is, I
incredible.
think, feel, because healing actually happens when you feel, and healing
Yeah.
actually happens in literally a split second of when you feel. Like, I have been like on this healing path for a while now, and every single time the same thing comes over and over again, and it's like all you needed was just like one split second to actually feel it. Like, I feel like we spend, and feeling is not suffering. I also want to just like really share this. A lot of times we are suffering and we feel we're suffering because I'm feeling too much, but actually we're suffering because we're avoiding to have that 1 second of presence in our bodies where actually, that stored memory, that stored emotion, that stored trauma is there, and to actually let it pass through you. It's literally that one
Yeah.
moment of which, as you said, like probably you do it your work through the breath. And yeah, breath is definitely one of the most beautiful ways to come back to your body and to actually like cannot count the countless number of times where I have allowed myself to, because as an Aquarius moon, honestly, I didn't realize even how detached I could be from my emotions. I thought like, oh, I'm a Pisces, I'm just so emotional, I'm so sensitive. But so many times I was actually suffering, I was not actually feeling what I needed to feel. And I feel like that's where healing happens. You know how they say, like, feel it to heal it. And it's literally that moment when you are actually like fearless, like say, how people have, how a lot of us, actually most of us, like we have fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. They're two of the most common fears that we have, especially our relationships bring it up so big time, right? And we kind of like we go on to recreate this thing, and it's like awakening is, what is awakening? Awakening is literally a moment where like, wait, I don't like this feedback, and oh my god, I have it in me to make a different choice. Because we are so entrapped by the concept of the way that we've been, I think, taught about God and spiritual, and I don't even want to say spirituality. I don't even think that was a word growing up, honestly. Spirituality or something. The word is just like God. And so much of it is like fear based. Like, if you don't do this, God will give you minus points. If you do this, you're going to get brownie points.
Like Santa Claus.
Santa Claus. Yes, very much like
The
it.
naughty
And
and nice list. Yeah.
yeah, and I've had this like very deep, I feel like, this very transformational relationship with, I feel like, in my journey with God. So I was just like, okay, God is not actually a father figure sitting up and being like, oh, you did this bad, so you get minus, and did this good, so you get plus. Yes, there is karma. Yes, you do have the records and all that stuff, but at this time, like, again, it's we are just like, it doesn't work that way. Like, we're not like God or spirituality is not so much about, like, I feel like there's so much of fear, like there is so much of fear in connecting to uh this essence within us, to feel our emotions or to connect uh with God, or with because again, all these conditions kind of like really, as you said, uh they kind of like cloud our vision, our understanding, our awareness, our, even the fact that, oh, I do have a choice. Like, we have, like what I was saying was like, we don't even know that we have free will. And by free will, I don't mean it's against God's will or something. I feel like so many of us are afraid to make choices because we think like you're going against, your life, you're going against God.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, I feel like if somebody decides to wake up, call it that, or whatever other word you have in your vocabulary, and you decide, okay, I want to make a different choice, I think that's the bravest thing to do. That's like, it takes so much of courage to say, like, actually, I would like my life to show me something different, and I know I can have it. Like,
Yeah.
that's a very empowering moment, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. One day everyone experience that, and they can if we
Yeah.
choose to show up for ourselves and try something outside of because we
Hmm.
live where it's an incredible time to be alive in the world right now. With
Yeah.
us being able to have these conversations out in the open without fearing that someone is going to come and hang us on a
Yes.
stake, burn us for being a witch or for
Yeah.
having some kind of like, occultish knowledge. And I mean, as long as we exist or operate only from the realm of the mind, we will always be entrapped. But
Hmm.
today we have a choice to step outside of what we've known and forge new paths for ourselves and experience free will as again as your own felt experience, and no one can contest that. Your truth is yours. It's not gospel in the sense of it's not been transcribed in a book that needs 500 or 5 million people to subscribe to for it to become real for you. If you believe the voice inside of you and if you start to act on it, the proof is in the pudding itself. So the feedback that you will start getting will be enough for you to take the next step, and then the step after that. And I think this is where faith in your internal judgment and your soul compass comes in, because it's very easy to use this narrative of all pray to divine will, where we do give up our personal will.
Yeah.
Having free will doesn't mean that your will get like you get to have what you want every single time, because this entire existence is not just about you. It's a very egotistical way actually to look at something. But can you strive for what you want? Can you put in the effort? Yes. And then But do you control the outcome? No. And none of us do. So whether it's trying to make something happen that you are doing out of a habitual pattern, let's say like if it's someone who is driven by greed or driven by ambition, like who caters to this or who subscribes to this conventional idea of success, which means you got to be wealthy, you got to be, you got to fit in the status quo, you got to have this car, this apartment, high rise, whatever. If you have all of these things, then you're successful. You can spend your entire life trying to bang your head against a wall if this is not being realized, because maybe it's not your path, maybe you're not meant to have all of these things, because clearly it's not actually coming to you from, like, you know how they say the universe conspires for you, that's not happening. That's a clear sign that maybe you should try something else. Also, that if you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling unhappy, if you come home and you lie down on a really posh leather sofa, but inside you just don't want to spend even 1 minute without some kind of external stimulant or alcohol or needing to do something, then clearly you're not on the right story and on the right path, buddy. But if you do exercise, if you do subscribe to a self-built perspective or a self-developed perspective about what your needs are, what your
Hmm.
wants are, how you want to make your way through the world, and then see how the world is supporting you, that
Hmm.
creates a whole different reality. And things are not black and white. Life is not black and white. Just because you are also on your path doesn't mean that everything is going to fall into your lap and life is going to become a bed of roses. There's no such thing. Every every choice will require, like every intention will require aligned action. We can't also live in the headspace of wishful thinking and be like, if this is, my divine calling, things are just going to magically manifest. It's part of our human evolution to also work towards what we want in this three-dimensional sphere, in this material realm that we live in, because that's why we're born as human beings, I would assume. Otherwise, we would have just been some kind of wispy beings floating around in the air. But we're not fairies in this lifetime, we're human beings. And I think that is also where opening your mind and starting to experience your heart calling or your soul speak or your intuition is going to help find that balance between living in a way where your material needs are met and satiated and you get to live the kind of life that you desire, and also feel fulfilled, feel purposeful, feel joyous, because you feel like you're living in a way that is not just giving you selfish benefit but is also putting back, because you are receiving so much abundance by your own definition of abundance. Just because everything is in alignment, you can give back from that place. So this also works to shift poverty consciousness that we have inherited from having generations in constant survival mode into abundance consciousness, because luckily for us, we are that pivotal generation. We're alive at this time where this shift is happening. And today we can find ways to earn our keep or our living or put a roof over our heads, even practicing what was previously considered more alternative, by understanding that it's really not alternative. It was alternative to a closed mind. But when you open your mind, everything is just like what works works. It doesn't have to be labeled and tagged and put into all these little neat organized boxes. And
Hmm.
that is definitely something that I feel a strong advocacy for. First of all, to recognize that this starving artist and this ruthless, this businessman or woman or entrepreneur, these are just stereotypical myths that don't need to be fueled by our thought and our conviction anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, and this is, and to go through this shift is everybody's responsibility, the people who are giving and the people who are receiving as well, because money has generally tended to have like a negative connotation, or this kind of like low vibration in the field of healing and spirituality. I've heard this for so long, and this was part of my own belief system. I felt very
Yeah.
guilty for starting to charge people when I started working, until I had to be spoken to almost like a dummy to be like, listen, how are you living right now? Who is who is providing for you? Somebody is providing for you, right? If you keep saying that, oh, how will I take money? How are you going to survive? Like I've been living in my family's home when I've been in Bombay. I moved out now. But 3 years ago, when I was trying to be very puritanical, and this puritanical paradigm is also breaking down because we don't live in a world of black and white and of somebody who's a saint and somebody who's a sinner. That's just not truth. So I
Yeah.
think even this awakening is about becoming comfortable with the grays and not wanting to subscribe to just good or bad or sainthood or you know a life of sin, and learning to find harmony and even appreciate the pleasure of this material realm, the pleasure of being able to provide for yourself financially by giving something that is a gift, because it costs a lot, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of energy. You know this, everybody in who is a giver, it doesn't matter which way they funnel energy into a space. Why is it treated any different than if you were a data programmer or if you're a investment banker? But this has existed, and luckily I have not met too many people who have ever asked me, why are you charging this much, or why does XYZ charge that much? And I'm really glad out of my way to inform people, to just question them and be like, how much do you spend on a drink unthinkingly? And then how much do you pay for the hangover that you experience the next day, or the poor choices you made that night under the intoxication? How much do you pay for a meal that you're going to
Mhm.
digest and is going to leave your body? But why do you think before investing in yourself as the biggest asset and receiving something that you cannot quantify in words? The value of what you receive is going to stay with you forever. It is
Hmm.
not something you can take back or is reversible. So, okay, so actually, I think how much ever people charge is less for this field, but I think it's very important for us to really stop for a moment and think when we're talking about spiritual awakening and we're talking about ascension. Every single paradigm that we have unconsciously or thoughtlessly subscribed to is coming up for reevaluation and for me and
Right.
choosing differently. And I think that's all a part of this conversation because it's about bringing spirituality into the physical world. Unless
Yeah.
we're learning how to, I don't know, just exist in the realm of thought alone.
I love how a conversation actually kind of like just found its way back to where I really wanted to actually talk about this. Uh, so the past 2 3 weeks, I have been actually posting a lot on LinkedIn, and this is one space where last year I even deactivated my account. And LinkedIn is something which I completely dissociated myself from ever since I got into spirituality. So it's like, I don't connect with those people anymore. Like, I'm so different, the classic Aquarius excuses. And like, I don't belong here. And of course, that had to do with a lot of like separation from the people who were in my network, because I worked in those spaces like earlier. Like, and now that I've started to post again, I'm just like remembering, like how when I was into marketing, or I was into digital marketing or copywriting, and I was so unabashedly post on LinkedIn or Facebook, wherever, like in a, there's a tone which you, when you talk about your work in a very professional way. uh my work, like mostly these days, like for me it's been like, okay, Instagram, podcast, and all these things, but LinkedIn has been this one kind of like this, a space with a lot of shadow, a space with which held a lot of charge, honestly. And I feel like the last 2 weeks I have been really like, it's become like a playground to reclaim myself, sort of, because the past few months it's really started to become very, very like, like very prominent. Like, okay, well, if everyone can talk about where they are, what they're doing, like, LinkedIn is the space where people very comfortably boast about, like, I got a position here, I got a position here, or I'm doing this, or I got promoted, or I bought a car, or whatever. And for the soft feminine, the good girl archetypes, like, what? And maybe, actually, when I look back at my past version, probably a part of me could have very easily done with, say, something like to do with marketing. but to actually, like, I want to like bring, I'm the intention behind me actually started to become more open on LinkedIn, is really, it's like it's an healing experience. It's not even a marketing strategy at this point right now. It's literally a way for me to reclaim my work, that my voice also matters, my ideas also matters, spiritual ideas also matter, a spiritual perspective on marketing or on money or on decision making also is valuable. It's also,
Yeah.
it's just as precious as somebody who's selling a, say a funnel, a sales funnel, or somebody who's talking about data analytics. and and I just like, I'm like right now literally in this moment to just like experience the whole unfolding, because it is bringing a lot of like these past memories of feeling judgments when I started doing this work. Uh, but at this point, like, of course, I've done a lot of like inner and external world to now feel much more confident and easy to even like joke about it on LinkedIn at this point. But it is still kind of like, like it is kind of bringing these tender spaces back where at some point I was not able to reclaim my work. I was not able to even claim my work actually, not to, and reclaim my gifts actually, reclaim who I really am. My feminine, I feel so much of what I do is very feminine. It's very rooted in the feminine essence. And so talking about it on Instagram, talking about it with women, it's all beautiful and healing and amazing, honestly. But when it comes to talking about this with, in the masculine world, with the masculine energy, with in a space which is all about, which is so data driven, like which is all about like yeah, very much data driven. And like, how do you talk about intuition, how do you talk about your feminine essence? And I just feel like this is such a beautiful, I feel like, unfolding for me happening right now, to reclaim the masculine ground, which I probably banished myself from, saying, oh, what am I supposed to do with LinkedIn? Like, it's not for me. Like, what am I supposed to even like do here? It's not even like it's my network is not here. My people are not here. And I think it's again like reminding me. It actually comes from a place where when I started doing this work, I spoke to somebody. um, my dad connected me to somebody who does these corporate events, corporate retreats, and all these things, wellness events. And so, of course, that person was somebody at a very high position, because my dad comes from a corporate background. And while I was speaking to him, I could just sense so much like, corporate world is not like like it's not like a space where women, if you give them all these spiritual tools, they're like, yeah, 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 I'm gonna do that. But men are really good, they're gonna have questions, they're gonna like really not believe. Corporate doesn't work like this, corporate doesn't work like that. A lot of like, I felt like now it's like coming like, oh my god, that was not mine. That was actually a lot of like this conditioning, this warning sort of like, which I received from the outside, which got me to completely dissociate from that space where, like, I mean, now it just feels so dumb, actually, on the retrospect. Like, why would I actually treat myself differently than I would have probably, if I would have probably transitioned to, say, a more socially acceptable profession? Then I would have proudly been like probably talking about my work. And then when I'm doing this, uh, I was very open and very proud on Instagram. I had this beautiful community, and it felt so much warm and so nourishing. But on LinkedIn, it felt every time, if I would post, it feel like a little cold and judgmental, and so I would just retrieve back. But now I'm like really like, let's play around with this. Like, like, why not me? If everybody can, why not me? And this voice deserves a space, and this conversation deserves a space, which is why I have these podcasts, I have these conversations. I feel like uh, this ties so well with this whole conversation that we're having today of bridging the gap, because I feel like we are literally stuck in these two paradigms, and I feel like there's so much of separation being fueled, like as you said, somebody who is striving for that shoulds, that credentials, which we are subscribed to, this is how it's supposed to be, and they're totally cut off from who they are. They're totally cut off from their self, from their own feminine essence as well, from their own emotions, and they're having it all apparently on the outside. And as much as it might be celebrated outside or it might be called a success outside, it's still not a fulfilled, happy, nourishing life. And at the same time, when I talk about it and see it through feminine perspective, somebody who's probably living their gifts, who's probably feeling so fueled and fulfilled by their work, but actually not having the material support, the physical support when it comes to, say, the money, say, the structure, say, the relationships, it's equally unfulfilling. Like, very honestly, I literally I've spent my entire 20s chasing, like, what am I here to do, what's my purpose, what's my path, and like, I don't care what money I make, da 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 da, and I just want to find out who I am. And the past 4 or 5 years, ever since I started doing this work, it's really been like, okay, actually, materialism also, like, it was so interesting that the moment I started doing the spiritual work, the relevance of materialism actually started showing up, which didn't before. Like, I was ready to be a starving writer, I was ready to be a starving freelancer, but when it came to this, because obviously shit gets real when you come to your later 20s, I feel, when you start to turn hits and you're just like, okay, adulting. But also, like, yeah, actually, even if I am feeling fulfilled, even if I'm doing a great work, a work of like, which really has an impact, which is really like serving people, and it is serving me because I feel so happy. Like, I could just feel how much, literally, when I started to love my work, after a point there literally came a crashing down, because it was like, I can't actually ask for money when I'm actually enjoying, because this doesn't feel like work. And it's just so effed up, because we've been taught that the way to work, the way to earn, the way to earn is through suffering, is through doing something. Like, your job is not supposed to make you feel fulfilled, or your job is not supposed to be something which you enjoy, which feels even nourishing to you, in a, like, how people say you're not here to make friends. Like, I see that meme so much, especially on LinkedIn. You're here to have connections, you're here to climb the ladder, da da da. And I'm like, I actually do want to make friends, I actually do want to connect, I actually do want to have a real relationship with my clients, with people in my industry, because it actually matters to me. Like, that matters to the feminine also within me. So yeah, like, how you talked about how you talked about, like, I think it really like just got me into this awareness that how it's all super linked. We cannot live in we cannot afford to live in this separation anymore. We cannot afford to be in this space anymore where we are just like, uh it's okay, like, I can't, like, as you said, like, there came a point where you had to ask yourself how you're going to pay your bills. And I'm like, okay, like, let's get real. Nobody's coming, or these people who are going to judge you, or who's probably making, who've had a reputation to make remarks or whatever, they're not going to pay your bills. They're not going to like come and like really support you in any way. You have to do this. And so that actually got me that courage to actually start going on, actually to fully actually start embracing my work. And of course, it's a continuous journey. I feel like I'm still very much on it. I feel like this is like, uh not just a it is a reclamation of a lot of who I am, because yes, I'm sure I would have spent probably eons, and and I can just trace back into my ancestry also now, that where spirituality is something which I feel in my family I didn't even know about. It's only when I started doing this work that I now I'm aware of, that my grandfather, my grandmother, now I'm like becoming aware, oh, even my dad is into these things. And so much of my family has been, but they never openly uh, saw it as something that you could actually make a career. And of course, circumstances have shifted as well, but at the core of it, it is this thing that I feel is driven by the fact that when you are feeling fulfilled in your feminine, like, you can either choose, actually you can only choose one. You either have to choose that soulless, lifeless masculine structure, or this. And I feel like I don't think that this is my individual experience right now. I feel a lot of us are feeling it in their own very different ways, because as conversations I'm having, uh, as I think right now it is a conversation with people like, I want to do what I love to do. But it's not just about doing what you love to do. This is so much, like, it's not just a tagline anymore. I feel, for me, this is so much like, this is the basic, it's the non-negotiable. And again, it's not something which means it's going to be easy, because I expected it to be very easy, aligned, because if I'm doing what my purpose is, it should all just fall onto my lap. And it did initially. But then I feel like it pushed me to become who could handle that, who could hold that frequency, I feel. So when you were talking about uh, we need to come into that aligned space, I think we also need to come into that aligned space to being that people, to being that person who could actually hold that frequency of like the whole journey of, I feel like, getting the material success or material desires fulfilled. It is a very spiritual path. It is a spiritual journey to reclaim your own authentic essence at the core of it. And I mean, in my experience, at least, I would say it might differ for everybody. But the more I claim me, the more I allow myself to be who I really am, the more I give myself permission slip to own my authenticity, the more aligned things happen, the more aligned manifestations occur, which is just obviously at this point like a science to me. But yeah, so thank you for like bringing that conversation there. I feel like I couldn't have even imagined that free will could mean that thing for a lot of people. Uh, so thanks for that perspective of like, yeah, it could just mean so many different things to different people, and it doesn't have to be restricted.
Yeah, there's no script un other than, I mean, there's no actual script binding you to anything. Uh, but I think personally for me, I mean, what I'd like to sign off with or make clear is that my dictionary has been becoming lighter with using titles and jumping from one ship to another. It's the same way that I don't understand how creating a gender to not be boxed in by another gender makes any sense. You know, we've gone from like her and him to they or them. And at one point, this became a very big uh, topic of conversation. I have many friends who are non-gender binary. I myself don't necessarily believe in, I believe that gender is, or sexuality is fluid, let's say. I believe that you're born in the body of a man or a woman, just biologically speaking, but sexuality is an energy, it's a force. So
Yeah, I
you
was
don't
talking about
necessarily
it.
have
I
to
was
be.
talking about it in energetic way. I was not talking about it in gender way.
No, no, no. I'm not talking about the masculine and feminine thing. I mean, I'm not speaking from there. I'm speaking, I mean, I'm
Okay.
using this as an analogy to say that
Okay.
energy is energy, experiences are experiences. Even let's say speaking about this feminine and masculine, there is a feminine that can be in overdrive and a masculine
Hmm.
that can be in underdrive. When we talk about
Hmm.
the wounded masculine or we talk about uh, the wounded feminine, let's say, the point is to not go to any end, any
Yeah.
extreme, but come
Yeah.
into alignment because as you come into it's very simple. It's like in the moment when you can witness yourself without any identification of what you like, what you don't like, how you were raised, what kind of, whether you're vegetarian or not, whether you're bisexual or not, whether you're monogamous or polyamorous, whether you are Christian or it doesn't matter. In the present moment, none of this exists because all of this is just mental projection. And in that
Hmm.
moment, that's why you can actually choose. You can choose to show up on LinkedIn, or you can choose to completely let go of LinkedIn because you realize that that's not a safe space for you, and there's no reason
Yeah.
for you to be there. And neither of those choices are right or wrong, right? I mean, they are
Absolutely.
just whichever one aligns with you the most, which means that it makes you feel seen, heard, appreciated, safe, welcome, because these are all inherent needs for us to be able to actualize. Without our primal
Yeah.
needs being met, we're constantly just going to be playing out all of these old survivalistic tendencies, whether they're to do with money, whether they're to do with sexuality, whether they're to do with tribe,
Hmm.
community, our sense of worth, because money is a very basic but a very traditional way of measuring self-worth if you look at it, right? That's why there's so much money
It
trauma
is.
also.
Yeah. The second house in astrology is not just money. It's known as this house of
Value.
money and self-worth. So you
Yeah.
just see it there, how it's so interlinked.
Yeah. It's value, right? It's like
Yeah.
how do you, even though we use money, so I mean, or money is taken on its own kind of, you know, authority. It's actually just meant to be a mean. It's meant to be a currency exchange, right? And it's not meant to actually define your worth. That by
Hmm.
that standard, everyone who earns a certain amount should deserve that on a meritocracy level. But that's not true. That's not how things work. So
Yeah.
I think again, just to come back to breaking the definitions of what we don't need to understand necessarily. We don't need to gain more knowledge today. I feel like we have enough of that, and we have intellectual information that was only reserved for the elite few in ancient times when you either were
Hmm.
born into a caste or you chose a certain life path. That information today is accessible to everyone or to most people who have the internet or who have access to healing therapies, modalities, and people who have committed their life or devoted, their a majority of their energy to working with these scriptures and then translating that so you can have a felt experience. I think that is the most empowering thing because what you experience becomes your truth and it helps you understand more and more of your truth and helps you move into more and more mind, body, soul alignment. I mean,
Hmm.
this is the value that I can offer given the work that I do and how I also work with people. It's to, even though even though I'm a human being in a space guiding you or a way shower or the tool itself or the practice itself is taking you somewhere, eventually we're all just the means to an end. The end being you being able to be present, so present in that moment that you can actually start to discover who you really are. And then from that place of clarity, decide what you need to now say no to or yes to, what needs to change or what you need to wait for to happen or whatever it is. But now you are actually charting your own map. So your power is in your hands.
Yeah,
And
it's all
initially,
about coming back into your own authority. Like we have like
yeah,
spent eons in outsourcing our authority. And I think that's what the core of even human design, what I talk about is that it is all about listening to your inner authority. And
yeah,
when you dive into human design, so much of it is actually like evident, like it's all about uh it's the whole process is about actually deconditioning at the end of the day. It's all
correct.
about
Yes. Yeah,
deconditioning the shoulds, the whatever information and whatever shoulds and must need to we've heard from the outside to come back to and listen to who you are. And I think that's what we started our conversation also with,
yeah,
about arriving at what your truth or what your inner knowing is, irrespective of what it might show up for some people in books, what it might show up for some people in podcasts,
yeah,
uh, or in their life or in their experience. Like as I said, like I never grew up with these esoteric rules, and so for me when they showed up, it was of course I had my own judgments, of course I had my own journey to be open to them and to not just embrace them, start sharing them also as well. But at the same time, yeah, like I feel like so much of what came is just so much from within. It's not so much of, yes, I love listening to other people's stories, experiences, books, but it's every time it's like, and I feel like it's somehow life's way of working as well. Every time, anytime I'm just clinging too tightly to an idea or philosophy, it's like I see an alternate perspective as well. And like, oh my
yeah,
God, that also makes sense
yeah.
completely. And
Unity consciousness.
yeah, exactly. Like,
Yeah,
it's because as I think we started, I don't know if we mentioned it in our conversation here, but we started a conversation right before that. Take what resonates with you, leave the rest. It's all about listening and honoring your own authority in the sense of we are not an expert. She's not an expert. I'm not an expert. I'm an expert in living my life. She's an expert in living her life. And so it's like every book is, I feel like, I remember like my dad used to be like, oh, because it's written in this book. And I was like, a human being writes a book. Like it's not the ultimate authority. Even I can write a book today. And just because someone writes, it's their experience, it's their account. And I feel like that's what actually shifting, right, in spirituality, in the changing landscape right now. We are no more outsourcing that authority anymore, like, oh, this person knows better, or this religion text, or this religious uh, guru knows better or knows more than what I might know within me. So yes, I feel like
I hope
every
I hope that that's changing. I hope that the dogma, this dogmatic way of looking at sacred text or other people's wisdom is changing, because there's no harm in adopting practices and trying different methods. I mean, everything that we've learned as, in this context, experts in the field, because we show up, or let's say as a facilitator, I have to show up with a certain amount of credibility and knowledge that I have learned from books and from other teachers. But I'm not trying to be a second version of them. After
hmm,
having learned the technical things, I've adopted it. I've adopted my own unique interpretation, perspective, and then mixed many things, just like I think
which are
everyone
unique
does.
to your
But
experience, which are unique
yeah,
to your own genius, which is like only Karishma has, which like
yeah, that's what makes
the
everybody unique. That is spiritual, I think, because that
yeah,
is no two people have the same soul print. Like no two twins even have the same thumbprint.
yeah,
No two human beings can have that, but because we live in a very mental driven world, and all of our feedback or our the way that we see ourselves is externally dictated. Like you said, our authority has been given away right from the beginning. This movement, I think, is just about taking it back. So it's not about necessarily decrying what exists. It's about appreciating that, wow, we're sitting in abundance. We have all of this knowledge. We have all of these different ways to experiment. But eventually, we must listen to what works for us and what doesn't, even if it works for eight other people or nine other people in the room that we're in. I think
100%.
that is the hard thing to do sometimes, even to,
Yeah,
especially when your environment hasn't changed, but you have. This happens with
yeah,
a lot of people who have life-changing experiences and they come back home. They go through this like extreme out of ordinary epiphany, or they experience something that they had never experienced in their lifetime. They may not even have the vocabulary or the language yet to articulate it, but they go back home to the same environment that they came from, and the same story starts again. The same role comes in, the same control mechanisms, because it costs energy to stop, it costs energy to heal, and our survival mechanism doesn't really care about actualization, right? It's a
yeah,
creature. It only cares about having its needs met and spending the least amount of energy so that if you are met with a death threat, you will survive.
yeah,
So we're also working with that, right? There's a lot that we're working with that we have no idea because we don't know how we work. So
yeah,
spirituality actually, again, for me and my own experience and the way that I work with clients and with any human being, is that it is giving you a guidebook on how to work with yourself as a unique being, because that is the only manual you have that is accurate to you, and nobody outside of you will be can tell you that that is correct or that is wrong.
yeah,
We can't, we conflate morality, which is a man-made construct depending on which era we're alive in and who's in power, with conscientiousness, which comes from within. So being a good person has nothing to do with being a societally acceptable moral person, but we have become that way, and that's why so many times the guilt, the shame, the fear, the self-neglect, the low self-esteem, the low self-worth, the anger, these we don't allow. Like we have developed such, we fare very low in coping with these things, in understanding these things, and accepting these things as part of our human experience as well. So I mean, this is a huge ocean of a subject to get into, because any any exit you take off the highway, is going to open up a whole new landscape to talk about. But I think in essence, just respecting the construct of this session, and that, where at the end of our uh, conversation on this journey, is that you are a soul. There is something very deep within you. There is a vast ocean of consciousness, of information, of wisdom, of insight, of guidance, of protection, because it is what you are made up of the same material that the cosmos is made up. So imagine how powerful you are, but also understand that there is a mental veil that hides this awareness from within yourself. And that's okay. We're not here to judge the systems that are at play. We're just here to become aware of them, acknowledge them, so we can work around them and get them to work for us instead of being slaves to this very ancient and, you know, biological, these constraints. But the more that we learn to connect with ourselves, the more that we learn to harness our potential, which is a vast current of energy. There's no end to what you can actually achieve. There's no end to what you can imagine for yourself. But all of these holds very, they exist in a very real way, even though they can't be touched and felt outside of you. I mean, they can be felt within, but even though they don't exist in reality, they are one of the most real things we feel within our mind, that we cannot do this, that we cannot be this person. We are constantly judging ourselves based on somebody else's projection of us that we've internalized. I mean, there's many barriers to becoming the superhumans that we have the potential to be. And I think all spirituality is an exploration. It's a very fun experience. It can be a playground experience to live from that place of authentic desire, so much more than being limited within just the mind space and constantly feeling like, you have to be on guard being who you are.
Hmm.
So
It ties, I
go
think,
out there
so.
and explore.
Yeah, it ties, I think, so amazing when I think about it from a human design perspective, because we're actually going through a shift. Like, our ancestors were driven by the splenic awareness. So there are three awareness systems, and they were really, really like driven by the splenic awareness, which is based on survival. And right now, what we are transitioning out of is this ajna, which is our mind. It is a very mind based, not like it's making decisions from the mind, and we're really shifting from going from making decisions from our mind based on our, this is what it is, this is how it should be, this is how it needs to be. Again, it is very driven from the data that we've collected over the past, the data that we inherit, the data. It's data, it's all data based. Like, how when we are making decisions, we see like so many times we are, even when the we like pros and cons, and like there's a list which has probably just three, and I would still feel pulled towards that option. And that's your intuition, that's that within. And so right now with this transition, we are really moving it's actually a very big challenge right now to get out of your mind and into your body. It's literally the essence of this whole transition of like we are shifting into making decisions from our, so there are different centers, but from ajna we're shifting to solar plexus. It is a whole collective mutation that is happening there, which is really changing the way we make decisions, the way we think and see and feel into life. And which is why right now emotions are felt very vividly. They are
Yeah,
like, no, like our so many times I think the reason why our parents, our grandparents, there's a collective gap, also sometimes generational gap in the sense, because the way they lived their life, the way they made decisions, the way things worked out, it's pretty different from where we are going from here. It's like
yeah,
that way is not working anymore. That data driven life, it's not working out anymore. And it's like so much, like the whole transition is like everything, it's literally about at this point arriving into your body, like the decision making, the authority is in your, like the first thing when you go into human design, that's what you're being like taught, that your authority is not here, your authority is here. In, I
yeah,
mean, those of you can't see us, it's not in your mind, it's in your body.
um, yeah,
And it's just been such a, it's a very exciting journey if you choose to look at that way. When you initiate, you might feel like, oh my god, uh it's crazy because this is how I've always done things. But if you
yeah,
look at it from another perspective, it's actually fun, and it's actually experimentative to start listening to your body when you haven't ever before. At least not, I think, in our conscious awareness, probably after 4 or 5,
yeah,
2 3 years, I think. We've always been listening to our mind. So yes, I'm so happy we could sit for this conversation and have this like extremely beautiful exchange of ideas and perspective and stories. because yes, I really hope this kind of like gives a dimension, gives a direction, or if nothing, just an inspiration to at least chart your own path, to listen to your own self, to no more outsource sometimes spirituality even to spirituality, like, you know what
Yeah.
that means.
Yeah. To any kind of system. No system is bigger
Yeah,
than you
yeah,
or more
absolutely.
important than you, let's say.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Karishma, for being here. If anybody wants to connect with you, how can they get to know you about and your work? Please share with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Shivani. And if anybody is interested in wanting to explore this mind body soul connection more, that is exactly what I do. So contact me. You can DM me on my Instagram page. The information I'm guessing will be this in the caption.
Yeah, it'll be in the show notes.
Yes. So you can just yeah, just send me a message on Instagram and we can connect. There's a bunch of workshops, retreats, and a one-on-one healing program that I'm also going to be initiating October onwards because I'm going to be out of the country and traveling soon. But I hope to see you in some of these containers and for you to have your own felt experience of the magnanimity of what it means to be you. And I'd love to support you in your journey of unbecoming and becoming your most real self. Yeah,
Unbecoming and becoming. I love that. We might title that this one that.
sure.
Because that's actually the essence of, I think, everything that we talked about today and everything that our work entails, I feel.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Karishma, for being here. And it was so exciting to talk to you and to share these wisdom, because I feel like this is something which you don't find in books actually. So I love this podcast platform for that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
true. True. Another reason why it's incredible to be alive at this time right now, to use this
Yes.
technology to
Yes.
spread
The
more of the
Aquarian age.
transmission. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would
So
like amazing.
yeah,
Thank you, Shivani.
thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in and listening to Aquarius Moon's riffing on spirituality.
Yeah,
So
two Aquarians in the house.
yeah, like I'm sure the heat was very palpable. So I really wanted to actually land it like that. I actually wanted to make an impact. So please let us know if it does. And to find out more about our work, you can check out all the show notes. I'll be leaving the links down below. And thank you, Karishma.
You, my love. Good night. Bye, everyone.